Little Miss Recap contains adult language. Little Miss Recap is intended for entertainment purposes only. Hi, everyone. I almost said welcome to Caught in My Web. No, this is Little Miss
Murders,
Recap.
mysteries, and cases capturing your attention.
Guys, I am Amy Archer, and I am here today with one of my favorite people, true crime podcaster, retired FBI agent, other twin mom.
Yes. Our most
Jodene
important
Weber.
title.
Yes, our most important title.
job. Yes.
Jodene, most of my audience knows you and loves you already, but can you just very briefly let everyone know what your law enforcement background is so that they know where you're coming from when you're talking about this case?
Yes, I am a retired special agent with the FBI. I worked for the FBI for 22 and a half years.
Wow, that's a long time. So you've solved cases, you've done all this stuff.
Yes, I've had long trials. I was on an evidence response team with the FBI. I work complex cases, so I do have a lot of experience that relates to a situation like this.
Yeah, so we're talking today, guys, about Karen Reed. And if you're not familiar with the trial, and even if you are, you need to join Jody's podcast. It's called Caught in My Web. It's on Patreon.
Correct.
And you have daily coverage of this, correct?
That's right. Every day I provide about a 1-hour podcast that summarizes the testimony from the day before. And I not only give you somewhat of a play-by-play in case you can't stream it, but then I also explain, all right, here's what's problematic. Here is what has changed. Here is what has evolved, or here's the strategy to this. So it really helps people, whether you've watched the first trial and are now comparing it to this trial, or if you're just hopping on board after watching A Body in the Snow and you don't know the entire history. So I try to please everybody.
And I think it's important too to say that you don't just do Karen Reed. Like, you do true crime, you're doing the Kohlberger case, you did some Sandra Birchmore stuff. Like, you're following what is the headlines in true crime.
Yes, all across the board.
Yeah.
Gilgo Beach, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
So let's get started with Karen Reed, because that's what we're here to talk about. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Body in the Snow. We were talking a little bit before we start recording. So I liked the documentary, but I also had some issues with it. And you say you did too. What are some of those issues?
Well, I think my biggest issue is they left out two key crucial elements of evidence. They left out the fact that Karen Reed connected to John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. And that is crucial because on a perfect weather day, it takes 6 to 7 minutes to get from 34 Fairview Road to John O'Keefe's residence on One Meadows Avenue. So if you know she's connecting to that Wi-Fi at 12:36, the latest she could leave 34 Fairview Road is at 12:30. Now that's important when you're thinking about the timeline and when people saw things and when the Commonwealth is alleging John O'Keefe was hit by a vehicle. In the first trial, they alleged that time was 12:45. But then their own witness contradicted their theory and said she connected to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. So that's problematic. Now, in this trial, you'll notice they've changed the timeline of the collision. They claim now it was around 12:31, 12:32. Well, that's not possible.
That's still
to make
difficult.
That drive. Exactly. Yeah. And so we see, in conjunction with that, Jen McCabe is now changing her testimony to fit that new timeline. So that was
and all of that was left out.
All of that was left out of the documentary. Mm-hmm. And then the second key critical element of evidence that was left out of the documentary is John O'Keefe's health data.
So important.
Oh, it shows his movement. And really, the problem is that it shows he went in a westerly direction, took so many steps at a time frame 12:21 to 12:24. And why that's important is the phone stops moving at 12:24. And it doesn't move again until 12:31. And what is somewhat lost and what you don't grasp by watching that documentary is that, yes, the phone moves at 12:31 to 12:32, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was John O'Keefe moving that phone.
Right. Yeah. So he didn't have on an Apple Watch. They're getting the data from his Apple phone, correct?
Correct.
And I feel like if you're a guy, that phone is in your pocket.
Correct.
Or a coat pocket or whatever, and it's going to pick up every step you take.
Well, not only your steps, but your gait. It shows
Right.
how, specific to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it will be interesting to see in this trial if we see any differentiation in gait, or if someone, if it is someone else that perhaps moved that phone, are they of the same stature? Would they have a similar gait? I'm watching for that and that kind of testimony, because I don't believe the phone was moved at 12:31 by John O'Keefe.
So if you were Karen Reed's lawyer, if you were AJ, would you have told her not to do this documentary?
Well, I'm wondering, and this is one of my concerns about true crime documentaries, because we're seeing this in Gilgo Beach. We see this now with Karen Reed. There's a lot of documentaries being made before cases are adjudicated.
Right.
And that brings in the question of financing and payments and who's getting paid. And a lot of these attorneys, were they paid by the producers of the documentary? Do they get essentially Karen Reed's payment, where she's not paid, but it goes to the attorneys? I have questions about that. I don't know, but that's one thing I look for. And it also brings up the fact that if an attorney, let's just say in general, participates in a documentary before the case is adjudicated, are they really looking out for the best interest of their client? Because if you're making statements like that, can it come back and haunt you if there is a mistrial and you have to try the case again? I don't necessarily know that they considered that this would end in a mistrial, because they filmed it before trial one was done. And I think Alan Jackson was very confident he would get acquittals across the board.
I think so too. And yeah, I feel like this should have been held until after the case.
They forgot to put a clause in there that this cannot be aired until after. And I don't know if they did or didn't. Obviously, it doesn't appear like it.
Because I will tell you, and we talked a lot about this in our coverage of it, is she did not come off likable. And unfortunately for women, that's a problem.
That is. She can be very opinionated. She has facial gestures that I don't think people like.
Right.
She's very expressive with her face. And some people just don't like when women express their opinions and they hold firm and they dig their heels in. And she does that. Now, if you're falsely accused of something, I can understand why one would do that. However, I don't think necessarily these work in her favor.
I agree, especially, and the documentary points this out, like the stuff she was doing in the courtroom with John O'Keefe's mother right there.
Right.
Like, you're like, ugh.
It's cringy.
It's cringy, but doesn't make her guilty.
Well, that's the thing. She's not on trial. It's not a prom queen contest. We're not voting for popularity here. It's, in terms of the law, does the Commonwealth prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? Right.
Yeah. So I have just a few questions. I'm just going to pepper you with questions because you're the expert here. So, and for those of you who did not watch the first trial, you covered the first trial exclusively, help me. What's the word? Exhaustively? Yes.
Yes.
So they can go back and listen to even that. But but I think you do a good job in your coverage of this trial of saying, here's how this is different than trial one. Or here's how this relates to trial one.
Yes, because there are a lot of witnesses changing their testimony, which has been fascinating.
Yes. So my number one question for you is, how do you feel overall that this trial differs from trial one?
Well, I do think Hank Brennan presents the Commonwealth case better than Adam Lally did.
Yes.
Not that I don't have problems with Hank Brennan. I do. However, Adam Lally was so lethargic and just his questioning was so loquacious and just went on and on and on, where I do think Hank Brennan cuts to the chase quicker. And a lot of these witnesses, they're moving, the pace of the trial is better under Hank Brennan. Now, that being said, he is skewing a lot. He is deliberately leaving out various police officers and firefighters, all the ones who did not hear Karen Read say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Right.
He's got a strategy. And I think the way he's presenting these witnesses may be confusing to jurors, trying to figure out, well, what exactly did happen? And what is the flow here? And where is this going? It's very disjointed that way. But the actual one-on-one questioning, I think he does do a better job than Adam Lally.
Do you feel like the defense is doing a better job or about the same? They were really good, I thought, in trial one.
They were very good in trial one. I think Alan Jackson needs to temper his bulldog attacks on occasion.
Yeah.
When you do it too much, it loses its effect. So I do think with Jen McCabe, I thought he was very masterful. I really did think so. David Giannetti has had some pretty hot days where he's been very angry.
Yes.
And then I think then we have our new guy, Robert Alessi. And while he is charming, he can also be exhausting. And the thing with Robert Alessi is he is so intellectual. And so he wants to make sure you understand every single point, and he takes all day long to make sure you get there. Well, that gets tiresome. So it's not that he's wrong. It's just a pacing issue with him.
Yeah, I agree. You really have to, at the core of this trial, this is a dead cop and his family and friends. And you have to walk a fine line between bringing somebody like Jem McCabe to heel, but also showing that your team has respect for law enforcement.
Correct.
It's really a fine line to walk.
Correct, because there will be people on that jury that have been raised to always, trust the police. And he was a police officer. He served his community. So there will be people who will be very sympathetic to him, not only because he's a victim, but because he was a police officer. And of course, there's allegations that by the defense that Karen Read didn't do this, that she's being framed by a Boston police officer.
Yeah, that's one of the things we talked about when we covered Body in the Snow is I think this case, and I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania and I'm across the state from you. And I grew up in an area where there's a lot of political corruption. I was saying like our mayor was arrested in the middle of downtown, the middle of the day by the FBI. So I'm used to this. And I think this Karen Read is a symbol of people saying we're not taking this anymore. Like this good old boy network is not working anymore and we're not going to let it. And I think she's become the symbol of that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Massachusetts historically, specifically the Boston area, has had a lot of public corruption.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think this is something I had a question when I was looking at it and, I'm not an expert by any means, so I'm not really sure this is true, but do you think they overcharged her? Do you think that's the initial problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. With the homicide charge.
Right.
If they had just done this as a manslaughter trial, we'd be done.
I agree. I think they would have gotten their conviction.
Yes, I agree. Because I do think there will be jurors in particular that are horrified by the extent of drinking and driving across the board in this case.
It was crazy. It's
and
crazy.
Even somewhat by the drinking by the victim. I mean, the fact that his own text messages, he said that day on the 28th, before they go out to the bars that night on the 28th, he says, well, I'm finally sober at 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. And the other cops that were drinking that day all day long. And then, there's so much drinking and driving. And it makes you afraid. If I were a resident of this community, to know just how much people are out drinking and driving after being at bars and parties for hours and hours. And it is.
Yeah, it's something that, because I live in the country and a lot of times people, the bar's right down the road. It's a country mile, which is really 4 miles.
Right.
And so you have a couple drinks, you think you're okay, you get in the car. that completely stopped when I had children, because I was like, there are mothers with their kids in their cars on the roads. And, like we would do it occasionally when I was in my 20s. These people are grown ups.
Well,
Like, what are you doing?
and the level of intoxication they get
Right.
to.
Right.
I mean, in just weeks apart from each other. And, I know people that haven't done that since they were in college, in your
Yes.
like you said.
Yes.
So
And the
it's
fact
shocking.
that they're all waking up and they have no idea of what happened, like that's
Pass
well,
out.
except Jen McCabe, who has very specific memories of some things and no memories of other things.
And then those memories change when she's confronted with them in a second trial. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about her for a minute. First of all, she had a glow up.
Big time. That spray tan, the highlights,
what's going
color
on?
analysis.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think even possibly some speech training, because she had this habit in the first trial of like sucking her saliva into her mouth and making these noises. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she didn't do that as much, because I got to tell you, I was dreading it, because 3 days of that last time was a lot. But yeah, she sat down and it was like, ooh, she's ready for camera.
So do you think that she is the linchpin of all of this?
Well, she, I think, was in the watchdog mode. She was the one, keep Karen out of the house. That's what to me, what all those lookouts meant. And then, text to kind of create a timeline that we can hide behind, create a protective barrier. Well, now she's got to stick to that and what she said in all these previous grand juries in trial one, and it's falling apart. It's falling apart on her because she can't maintain consistency with all the other evidence, like connecting to the Wi-Fi router, connecting with the Apple Health data. It's just not syncing up.
Is the fact that Karen connected to John's Wi-Fi at 1236?
1236.
Is that solidified in concrete 100%?
Yes, the Commonwealth has had Nick Areno, their Massachusetts state trooper, testified to that in both the first trial and now this trial. So it is not in dispute that she connected to his Wi-Fi at 1236. So she is back at John's. Now, it's a 6 to 7 minute drive. We learned yesterday there is minimal snow that time. So considering it is good conditions relatively to drive, 6 to 7 minutes, could she have gotten home in less than 4 minutes if she hit him at 12:31, 12:32? That will have to be the decision of the jury to make. Is it possible she could get back to his residence that quickly, if you believe the Commonwealth timeline? Now, again, wrapping it back to
one of the theories that... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, wrapping it back to Jen McCabe, she has changed what she's saying now. She said first trial, I looked out 5 times. I saw Karen Reed in front of the house 5 times. And every time I looked out, I texted John O'Keefe. Well, now she's rolling that back. Now she's saying, well, I know I saw her at 12:30, 12:31 and 12:27. And I saw her further up past the trees. But I don't know if I texted every time now. So now she's rolling that all back.
There's no way. I mean, I have been drunk many times in my adult life. There's no way that I would remember I would remember I looked out and I saw them and I shot him a text. I wouldn't remember the exact times. Like, I wonder how much of this memory has been clouded in 3 years since this has happened?
Well, and especially because she claims she didn't remember when she woke up, that her husband, Matt, had to tell her she looked out and texted all these times.
Right.
But then she called her sister, Nicole, at 5:07 in the morning.
Oh my God. When that came out, I was dying, because you've been saying that all along.
Yes.
And we talked about that in Body of the Snow. I'm like, Jody has been saying, why didn't anyone call the people inside the home on Fairview? And here we learn she did.
And that didn't come out in trial one. So that is a huge bombshell. So she's calling Julie Albert, at 5 a.m. Why are you calling Julie, first off? You shouldn't be calling her before you call Nicole, and she
No.
does. The only reason you call Julie is because Colin's involved somehow. That's why you called Julie. Then she calls Nicole at 5:07. They talk for 38 seconds. And again, the phone records are wrong.
It's a butt dial.
It's a butt dial. Yeah, it didn't happen. The voicemail didn't kick in. Well, nobody believes that, Jen McCabe. Nobody believes that. So she's tipping them off that, hey, this is on. It's going down. That's the way anybody rational would take that.
Little Miss Recap will return in a moment. For ad-free episodes, visit littlemissrecap.com/support. So you listened to my coverage of that documentary.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard, but I did like a 10-second pause to show people like how long that can be. So you might think, well, 38-second phone call, that's nothing. 38 seconds is plenty of time to say, Karen's up. She's coming over. She's looking for him. Get ready. It's going down. It's plenty of time to say that.
And exactly like the Brian Albert, Brian Higgins phone call at 2:22, same thing, 22 seconds. That's a long time. And all these people are saying these calls didn't happen. These phone records are wrong. Those calls happened, people. They happened. They happened. Yeah. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can you tell me a little bit about Colin Albert? Because I'm not really sure how he fits in. I don't remember that from the first trial, and they didn't really talk a lot about it in the documentary.
So he showed up at 34 Fairview Road sometime before midnight. And
he's their kid, Nicole and Brian Albert's kid.
No, he is their nephew. He is the son of Chris and Julie Albert.
Okay.
And he has a bit of a reputation for being potentially a little rough around the edge. In any event, he showed up at 34 Fairview Road before midnight. And it came out during trial number 1 that as everybody's coming home from the bars and going there after midnight, he's standing at the doorway getting ready to leave, waiting for a ride from Jen McCabe's daughter, Allie McCabe. Now, the problem is when they show the text messages between Allie McCabe and Colin about this pickup, the text messages clearly look altered. The time change from the 28th to the 29th, the timestamp isn't right. There's extra commas where there shouldn't be. So right away, everybody's like, well, what's going on with this? This looks hinky. And then Jen McCabe deleted all her communications with Allie McCabe off her phone. So that's
with her own daughter.
With her own daughter, which is weird. But then when Allie McCabe testified in trial 1, she was asked about picking up Colin. Colin wasn't there when whatever happened. Colin wasn't there. Well, her Life 360 data didn't match her testimony. And what it showed was she went to the high school. So many people wonder, did she pick up Colin to get him out of there because something had happened to John O'Keefe? He had been injured. And did they go to the high school to get rid of, say, bloody towels, garbage bags, things to clean up after a fatal head injury accident?
So the Life 360 data shows that she picked him up and then went to the high school, but she testified that she picked him up and went somewhere else.
She went home, yes. Okay. And he claims, and there was a lot of testimony in trial 1 about, well, Colin was home by 12:10, and the parents said he was home. Well, then it came out during the trial, they weren't home yet. And then, so they had the timing at the bars of when the parents leave. And then the parents said, well, he got home right after I did. And then they were able to show, well, you didn't get home until about 12:30. Colin couldn't have been home then if you said it was after. So it kept pushing back. But it was clear in trial 1, there was a concerted effort to attempt to testify that Colin wasn't there.
Did the daughter have any kind of explanation for her Life 360 showing that she was at the high school, or did they not bring it up?
They attempted to talk to her about that, but it was very confusing. And it was showing where she would travel to different locations in a time span that wasn't probable or realistic. So there were problems with the Life 360 data.
Okay.
But there were also problems with her because she appeared rather evasive as well about what was going on that night and where she was at certain times.
So there's a few different theories of what happened. And I'll ask you what
Yeah.
your theory is in a minute.
Okay.
But one of the theories is that Colin hurt him, right? And then they scurried him out of the house and got him away.
That is one theory. Yes. Like something happened between John O'Keefe and Colin, and Uncle Brian took charge and was like, get him out of here. And then they went into cover up mode. So that's one theory. Another theory is Karen Reed hit him.
Yeah.
Another theory is that Brian Higgins was egging him on to come over there, and that something went down between John and Brian Higgins, and then the dog inserted itself. And so then John is injured. And so that way, Higgins and the Alberts both have culpability there.
I also wanted to ask you, speaking of Brian Higgins, about the Jeep. So because again, I'm not following this as closely as you are. I'm listening to you, but like I'm not watching it.
Right.
So what is the evolution of the Jeep situation?
So trial one, we had the Alberts, Brian and Nicole, and the McCabes, Jen and Matt, all saying Higgins' Jeep was parked by the mailbox. But trial one, we also had all the witnesses in the Ford F-150 truck who came up right behind Karen. And none of them saw that Jeep there. So who do you believe? Do you believe the family or do you believe the Ford F-150? I believe the Ford F-150 witnesses that Jeep wasn't parked there. So the question becomes, who's lying and why? Because you can't believe them both. You got to pick a side.
Especially since the driver of the Ford F-150 was pretty sober.
Yes.
So probably like one of the only sober people on site.
Yes. So my theory on why they keep bringing up that Jeep, it's if you're insisting it's somewhere where other people say it's not, why are you doing that? It's you want them to look somewhere else so you're not looking in the other direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my theory is, and this ties into the phone movement, I don't think John O'Keefe was moving that phone at 12:31, 12:32. Which means someone else was like, get that phone out of the house. That way we can say he never came in the house. So they need Karen to leave in order so they can move that phone. So that's why they're doing lookouts and they're watching. So as soon as she takes off, the phone starts moving again. I think Brian Higgins, because he had an office in Canton PD, parked his Jeep down in that other lieutenant at the time. Now he's the deputy chief, but Lieutenant Kelleher's driveway, and may have parked his Jeep down there, which would show on his Ring cameras that he had outside. I think it was an Arlo camera, not Ring, but Arlo cameras. And of course, they never went and got his camera footage.
Yeah, of course.
So,
it's probably missing, even if they want to go get it.
Exactly, or delete it or invert it. So I think the thing that would make the most sense to me, because Higgins testified, he left early between 12:30 and 1, but when he testified during the first trial, he was pretty insistent. No, I left right around 12:30. Well, the phone moves at 12:31. So most likely he would be the one, if anybody else carried that phone, it would be him. And if he parked catty corner at that other cop's house, that could be where the Jeep is. He would know that guy from having an office at Canton PD. The Arlo camera footage would disappear because they wouldn't want to show that.
Of course.
And so then Higgins gets in his Jeep, goes to leave. Where does he drive by? The library, which also conveniently has 2 minutes of video missing from 12:37 to 12:39. We know it's not Karen because she's already back at John O'Keefe's. That would make sense. So that's why I think they're lying about the Jeep.
Interesting. So, all right, let's get to your theory. And disclaimer, you are not investigating this case. You're not involved. We are just two ladies of a certain age talking about our theories.
And right now, based on the evidence presented right now, up to this point, I would say I do believe some sort of accident happened. I think something accidental happened that was covered up. Now, I am watching for
Okay.
the telematics data on her SUV to come out at this trial, because we couldn't trust Trooper Paul in that first trial with the way he claimed that John was clipped and he flew and pirouetted in the air. We can't even give that any credence.
No.
But
And she backed up going like 65 miles an hour, which is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. But I do want to hear what their expert says about that. Now, we know that the defense has the ARCA witnesses who say John O'Keefe wasn't hit by a car. So that, I find them highly credible.
I did too.
ARCA, people don't realize, ARCA was who was contracted when the space shuttle blew up. They're the ones that figured that out. Okay. They are as premier as you can get. So if they say John O'Keefe wasn't hit by a car, I got to say, all right, I find them credible. What else would be going on here? So to me, do I think anybody in that house set out to murder John O'Keefe? No, I don't believe that either.
No.
I think look, John O'Keefe was drunk too.
Yeah.
And, guys talk, shit to each other. They just do.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think, and they could have even been playing around like they were in the bar with the play, jockeying and jabbing at each other.
Yep.
And perhaps that dog was coming in. We learned in the first trial that dog had been let out right around this time.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the dog intersected and
wasn't this one of John O'Keefe's first or only times in that house? He wasn't there a lot, right?
A stranger.
Okay.
So I think something was going on, whether it was an actual fight or not, but something was going on. The dog got agitated. The dog got involved. I think he ultimately fell back. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is that had you asked me this during trial one, I would have said, I think this happened in the basement. And I think he fell back and hit his head on that blue prong on the gym equipment that holds the crossbar. But now Robert Alessi mentioned the garage and a covered structure in the garage. Is it possible the dog came around and got over that fence? Because we learned in the first trial that dog had jumped the fence before. Mm-hmm. Is it possible when John O'Keefe was walking up that driveway, the dog got out, attacked him, he fell and hit his head on, one of the vehicles or something. Mm-hmm. And then Colin's there, drags him inside, tells Uncle Brian, and then that's ensuing.
Yeah, that could be. Somebody brought up a really good point to me, and I did not think of this. The voicemails that Karen left John. Mm-hmm. You're a pervert. You're this. You're that. I fucking hate you. Whatever. All that.
Right.
If she knew she hit him and was driving away, wouldn't she have been doing the Scott Peterson of, hey,
love you, honey.
It's
Have a
me.
great time at the party.
Yes.
I'll see you when you get home. Yes. I got Kaylee. No worries.
Yes.
Exactly. No, she's ticked. She's ticked because she doesn't know where he is and he's not answering.
So even if there's a world in which she hit him, it was not done with malice. Like, it was not done with forethought.
Exactly.
So it still puts it in manslaughter.
Correct.
Right? Like,
Correct.
It's just, this is so crazy to me. Do you think that there's a world in which he went in the house, something happened, he came out of the house, and she hit him by accident? I don't know. See, I don't think he was hit at all.
I don't think so either, because I just believe ARCA. I believe them. I do.
Yeah.
He had
no injuries below the neck, correct?
Right. And it's not just ARCA. When you look at ARCA and then you look at all the doctors that testify.
Yeah, they're like, no.
They're like, no, this is not presenting like a pedestrian strike. And then we've got all the evidence problems. And for me, as a former FBI team leader for an evidence response team, I have a real problem with all that taillight and the magic hair on the bumper and the glass found at the scene that doesn't match any other glass, and all the lacks of chain of custody and not turning
the leaf blower
and the solo cups. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's just but altogether, it's just an improper investigation. And what really troubles me with that documentary, and I mentioned this to you, whether you think Karen Reed did this or not, everybody wants justice for John O'Keefe. Everybody feels terrible that he was killed, no 100%. Matter what happened. Mm-hmm. But those who think Karen did it, you're entitled to your opinion. But how do you not get extremely frustrated at the Alberts and the McCabes when
Yes.
they're and Higgins talking about butt dials and destroying phones? And to me, the fact that all these people in the documentary didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Why are you not frustrated with them too? Like, hey, you're making a circus out of this because of what you're not admitting to or what you're denying or what you did. To me, those people were not friends to John O'Keefe.
I
At
agree with you.
all.
That's a great point. And especially, and I think you were pointing this out a lot when Jen McCabe was testifying, like Jen McCabe painted herself into a corner where she either had to admit she lied or that law enforcement doesn't know how to do their job.
Exactly.
And she's,
Yes, that's been the big win for the defense so far in trial number 2 is that she couldn't lie about the group chat this time like she did the first time.
That group chat is wild.
Well, when they're talking about Karen and if she pleads, this will all go away, but if not, it's going to be an episode. I mean, that to me was, really, really shocking.
I agree. So let's try to figure out the mindset. Okay, something happens in the house.
Right. And I think, to me, it's like, well, why wouldn't Brian Higgins flip? Because he's got a federal pension on the line here.
Yeah.
Why would he protect these people unless he was somehow involved? And then I keep going back to John O'Keefe looked like he had gone 5 rounds with Mike Tyson. You know, his own brother said that. So to me, that sounds like some sort of fight went on. He had abrasions and contusions on his front of his face. Then he had the arm injuries, and then he had the wound in the back of the skull. So the wound in the back of the skull to me is he fell after being hit. And so I wonder, and then the dog got in there too. So we have the 3 ascending, descending flights of steps. To me, that would be he walked down some steps. Then something happened. Maybe he got pissed, turned to leave, started going up. The dog attacked him, made him go back down. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But to me, for everybody to be involved in this, Higgins had to be somehow involved. Otherwise, I think he would have flipped by now.
Yeah.
And the dog element puts the Alberts and liability on the line. That makes them culpable if the dog was involved. And it's on their property.
So how do they get to, like, do you think they just saw I guess here's my question. Did they say, shit, we got to pin this on Karen? Or did that opportunity just present itself when she started going crazy in the morning?
I think it just presented itself. I do.
Okay.
I think, and a lot of people say, well, why wouldn't they put him back by the train tracks? Or, well, where's John O'Keefe going to walk? He's going to try to walk home.
Right.
You're going to put him on the road and make it look like
they're going to make it look like he was trying to leave.
Right. Right. Which is why the phone got put out there and why Jen McCabe made all those calls to try to find where the phone was dropped. That's my theory.
Yep.
Because none of it otherwise makes any sense. Because he wouldn't, if he got hit and smacked by that car at 12:31, he's not going to check a message from Jen McCabe and then lock his phone and then pass out and die. It makes no sense.
Right. Yeah, I do feel like it was just an opportunity. They realized she was loaded. Here's what I'm wondering. Do you think they put him out on the street to get hit by the plow? Which is dark. It's dark to think that way.
Very, very dark.
But they have to explain the injury on the back of the head.
Yes. And you would think that would be like hitting the head of a plow.
Yeah.
Which also makes me wonder, well, what if Brian Higgins' Jeep was parked at the front of the driveway and not by the mailbox, and he walks up and slips and hits his head on his plow, and then the dog comes around, and then they're like, what do we do? And move him around the backyard through that bulkhead down into the basement. There's all sorts of things and theories. Like I said, I'm waiting for that telematics data from the SUV because I think Once I hear that, and then I hear ARCA, because ARCA is going to counter that. They've got all that now, and they're going to counter whatever the Commonwealth puts on for their accident reconstructionist. I'm really curious to hear all that, because if I'm still sold on ARCA's theory, which I'm pretty confident I will be, because those guys were fantastic last time during trial 1, then it's got to be, all right, this timeline doesn't make sense by the Commonwealth. All these lies and butt dials and denials of the 507 phone call. I mean, there were clearly preparations going on there for something.
Yeah.
And we got to ask ourselves why.
Little Miss Recap will return in a moment. For ad-free episodes, visit littlemissrecap.com/support.
So it's really a matter of what happened and who was all involved. And I just don't think that call to Julie would have happened after 5 a.m. if Colin didn't factor into this somehow.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, maybe Colin's a hothead, right? That's his sort of reputation.
Yes.
But then there's also, the Brian Higgins of it all, and he and Karen texting and flirting. And did John O'Keefe know about this?
And he was ghosted. And I don't think his ego did not like that. And
do we know that John O'Keefe knew about that?
Well, I thought that he had caught them on a camera.
I did too, like a kiss or something.
Yes.
Right?
And like they had moved past it, but yet he was, it's kind of like, how sometimes women don't always forget things and bring it up like 10
I don't forget
years later.
anything.
Well, I think he kind of did that too.
Yes.
So, and I mean, let's face it, John and Karen, their relationship was at a breaking point, and it was toxic all the way around. On both sides.
It was toxic. Wow.
Oh, it was so passive aggressive.
Yeah,
and I'm
it was
like,
bad.
Can you please grow up and can you please communicate? But I do think, part of the reason I think they were so affectionate, especially at the waterfall, they were both putting on a show for Higgins.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And I think that's why, as they were getting ready to leave, we see Higgins, motion over to John O'Keefe, and then Higgins texts John O'Keefe, you come in here. And I kind of wonder, was Jen McCabe originally supposed to separate Karen from John so that they could get John alone, so Brian Higgins could tell John what had been going on behind his back? Yeah. Was that maybe the original plan? And then everything just went sideways with something happening with Colin and the dog?
I've heard people say about this case, it's hard to believe that these grown men, these police officers, would be beating somebody up in a basement. I'm like, really? They're acting like 20-year-olds. The way they're drinking and jumping into cars and driving around, that is the behavior of 20-year-olds.
Absolutely.
So I don't put it past them beating the shit out of somebody in a basement. I really don't.
Well, and especially because they were all into the boxing and fighting. Yeah.
And they were all drunk.
And all drunk. Everybody was drunk. Very, very drunk.
So Brian Higgins, for those of you who aren't watching, he's the one he got rid of a cell phone that he had, correct?
Yes.
And like drove to a military base and dumped it?
And ripped up his SIM card.
What?
Right. So I think and if you watch when he testified, there were a couple times he got really choked up. And I was watching him, and when he started talking about John O'Keefe's nephew, he was really fighting back, crying, and I'm like, he knows something. You can just see it, and he's holding it down. He's holding it down. So I think if he was threatened with losing his federal pension, he could flip.
And he says that he left and went to the police department, right? But isn't there time discrepancy there?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was really, if you watch his testimony from trial 1, he's like, well, I knew it wasn't going to be long there at 34 Fairview Road because they only had beer and White Claw and I drank Jameson and ginger. So I knew I'd be going. So AJ, Alan Jackson, asked him, well, when did you leave? And he's like, well, between 12:30, 1 o'clock, but really closer to 12:30. He was really the one pushing that. But in the first trial, if you watch Alan Jackson's like, And then you went to the Canton Police Department about 1:30, 1:30, 1:30. And I'm like, why are you stressing 1:30 when he's saying he left around 12:30? It's only 5 minutes down the road. Well, now we know that they have this video that was produced to Karen after trial number 1, where he does show up at Canton PD at 1:26, and then he's on the phone at 1:34. And he said, well, I had to go move my cars around at the police station because the plow was going to come through. Well, you had just been there hours before you go out drinking. Why wouldn't you move your cars then?
Yeah.
None of it made any sense. So yeah, he's at the police station at 1:30 in the morning.
And who's he calling?
Well, that's it. You're not ordering a pizza at 1:30 in the morning. So he's on the phone at 1:34. We know there's the calls between him and Brian Albert at 2:22. Where is he? What's he doing?
Am I imagining this, or did Brian Albert intimate that he was like having sex with his wife when these calls were happening?
Yes. And here's where that backfires on him, because so many people who support Brian Albert say, well, he was drunk. Of course he's not going to get up in the morning. He was passed out drunk. He's not going to hear all that commotion outside. And I'm like, well, it didn't stop him from allegedly performing for his wife.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how old is this guy?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well,
many 40-something-year-old women are all going, I don't think so.
And the fact the dog wasn't there in the morning. That's another
where was the dog? So how did they explain that? Where did they say the dog was?
Well, they haven't explained it.
Okay.
They haven't. Now, the defense theory in trial number 1, they really gave the impression they think Caitlin Albert took it with her when her boyfriend came to pick her up, because that made no sense either. How he went home half an hour away to get some sleep because he had to go out and plow at 3 in the morning. And then all of a suddenly comes to pick her up half an hour away back in Canton, and then drives home half an hour again. To me, that's get the dog out of the house. Take the dog.
Yeah.
But we don't know. Or did Higgins take the dog, drive home with it, dump it at his house, and then come back so that he could be available? And that's why he's at Canton PD at 1:30, because he lives, if you figure out how far it is to get from 34 Fairview Road to Higgins' home and then back again, it's exactly that amount of time.
Oh, okay. I did not hear. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I was explaining this to my mom, who, I don't know, she's still sitting over there trying to solve John Bonet, and she is not putting her time on Karen Reed here. But I'm trying to explain it to her. And I said, here's what you need to know. And the way I described it to her is I said that I explained what happened. I said, the biggest, most incriminating piece of evidence to me is that nobody came out of that house. It is a cop's front lawn. There are ambulances. There's, first responders running all over the place, women screaming. First of all, that dog barking would have woken them up if the dog was there.
If the dog was there.
Yes. And you brought up a really good point the other day. You're like, once you're a parent, you never fully sleep. And once if you're a first responder, you never fully sleep.
Exactly. It's always one eye open.
Yeah.
And that bothers me. And the fact that, okay, Karen calls you, Jen McCabe, and a man is missing, and you don't immediately call your sister, or you lie about it. And then it's like, well, your brother-in-law is a fugitive hunter. You got to find a missing man. Call the fugitive hunter.
And here's the thing. Jen McCabe could have said, I called Nicole Albert to see if John was there.
Right.
But she never said to Carrie and to Karen, oh, he's not there.
Right. Exactly. And you know what else we don't see in their text messages is, well, what do you think happened? Do you think that, we don't hear that kind of stuff.
No. Nope. No, they're not like, why do you think she hit him?
Right.
Do you think like nothing? And then Jen McCabe with that 911 call, there's a guy in the snow.
Yeah. Now
that's her dear friend.
Here's something we got to watch for this trial, because just yesterday, the voicemails came in. All of Karen's calls and the voicemails where she's screaming at John. But the last voicemail, she had called John while she's in the car with Jen McCabe and Carrie, and then she sees his body, she drops the phone, and then that voicemail keeps recording in that car. Now, Jen McCabe, that's at 6:03. The voicemail runs for several minutes. Jen McCabe called Nicole at 6:07, 6:08. So the question is, does that voicemail pick up Jen McCabe talking to Nicole?
And this is on Karen's phone?
It's on Karen's phone. Well, it's recorded on John O'Keefe's voicemail. But it's from Karen's.
Okay.
So I'm listening as this is coming into court yesterday because I'm like, this is it. Because they're entering this into evidence. So I timed it. So right when they started the voicemail, it's 4 minutes from 6:03 to 6:07 when Jen McCabe calls Nicole, and they cut off at 4 minutes, the Commonwealth, entering that into evidence. So why aren't they playing it to the end? That bothers me because there is microdots, which has enhanced the remaining portion of that voicemail. You can hear Jen McCabe whispering. Now, what she says is up in debate. But I don't necessarily think that whole voicemail got entered in yesterday. So I'm curious, is the defense going to attack that? Because we know, based on the phone records, she talked to Nicole at 6:07 or 6:08.
Oh, this is so interesting.
Well, it's a whodunit. It's a whodunit. And the fact that they're lying about these phone calls and the fact that we found out about the 507 phone call, none of it adds up.
Which kind of leads me to my last point. I said when we covered the documentary, there is no way on earth all of these people are going to keep this straight. So if somebody flips, who do you think will be the first to flip? Do you think it's Brian Higgins?
I think he would be the most likely because the family's going to stick up for the family.
Yeah.
They're going to protect each other. And he's not family. Bottom end of the day, he's not family. He's kind of a lone island. And Brian Higgins has to look out for number one. He's got a pension to protect.
Yeah.
And I really think he could flip, but I also wonder about Michael Proctor. Because now that Michael Proctor has been fired, obviously he's appealing it. But if he doesn't win that appeal, why would he keep his mouth shut? He knows more. He knows more. And I also wonder, there's been all this talk about the federal investigation being closed.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the federal investigation into public corruption in John O'Keefe's case has been closed. But that doesn't necessarily mean a federal investigation into the district attorney's office has been closed.
Right.
There could be more than one investigation going on. And I highly suspect there is another investigation based on all the activity that occurred in the Sandra Birchmore case.
Okay. Is Brian Higgins caught up in the Sandra Birchmore thing or no?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No. But
so he really is kind of the outsider here.
He's an outsider. He really is. And like I said, when he got so choked up last time, to me, that was a sign like he could be vulnerable. He could be vulnerable. And I just think they don't have the metadata from all those videos.
Yeah.
So to me, Proctor had access to all those videos, the Ring camera system through John O'Keefe's phone. He had access to everything produced from the Canton Library. He had access to the Sallyport videos. You look at everything Michael Proctor didn't do. He didn't interview people. He didn't do chains of custody. He didn't
go in the house.
Evidence. But boy, he went and got that Sallyport video. He went and got it twice, and he had it. So why? Why would you make such an effort to do that unless you did mess with that taillight?
Yeah. Oh, man. So I believe if I'm a juror, I'm looking at this and I'm like, look, I don't know if she hit him or not, but there is enough reasonable doubt that if I'm doing my basic law obligatory job here, I'm just going to say reasonable doubt. I don't know how these jurors, first of all, I don't know how they found jurors who are not tainted on this case already.
Right.
But second of all, I don't know how these jurors can think there is not reasonable doubt just based on the mishandling of, O.J. Simpson got off because Mark Furman was a racist. I mean, I can't even imagine that they're going to put this woman in jail on homicide with the police bungling the investigation the way that they did.
Well, and the jury has a lot more to hear, like the medical examiner and ARCA, and they just started to hear about the forensics and the collection of the evidence yesterday. And I'm sure, I mean, even if you just watch Law and Order and don't have any, or CSI, any law enforcement experience, you got to know the red solo cups and the leaf blower. And that officer, Peter Gallagher, or Paul Gallagher, he was not Peter Gallagher, that's the cute actor, Paul Gallagher. He was so arrogant.
Yeah.
And he was so, absolutely not, absolutely not. I'm like, dude, there are people in law enforcement all over the country that are laughing at you because you are absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just ridiculous, his level of arrogance and the way he defended. It's, very controllable, the leaf blower. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just, you could see things blowing around. It's like, okay, I hope there's no hairs or fibers there because you just lost it, buddy.
So if you're describing to somebody who just woke up out of a coma this case, what is your number one? Your number one, mine is them not coming out of the house. What is your number one reason that you think this investigation is fraud?
All the camera deletions, inversions,
and
we got at least three systems with problems at all crucial times when you can see the taillight.
Yeah.
Then you've got John's body. John's body is fantastic evidence. The arm injuries and then the lack of injuries below the neck, it doesn't add up to a pedestrian strike.
Yeah.
So that to me is very, very concerning. And then you got all the behavior problems.
Yeah.
All the behavior problems.
Like I said, I think there's too many people involved in this. They're never going to be able to sustain this long term. Somebody's going to flip somebody. I think people have already screwed up. I mean, that's obvious. But somebody, I mean, it's only a matter of time before there's a falling out or there's, and there's somebody flips.
Well, and eventually, I mean, I think it's going to be the younger ones. The younger ones, they can't keep their mouths shut, or they're tired of being harassed at their school, or your mom is Jen McCabe, and I'm always going to be under this umbrella, and you lied, and everybody knows my parents lied because you listened in on that interview of Carrie Roberts in the living room.
Yep.
I mean, eventually,
Yeah. Well, Jody, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for all your promotion of Caught in My Web.
Yeah, this has been so fun. Promise me you will come back.
Oh, I will, definitely.
And give us another update because we are just, I mean, you have to see the chats on my Discord and stuff. People are crazy for this case. I mean, it's like I said, I think it is a symbol of taking down a broken system.
Well, and I think a lot of people realize this could be any of us.
It could be, if it could happen to a rich white woman in Massachusetts, it could happen to anybody.
Well, and it makes you wonder, would this have been the plow driver had Karen not had that broken taillight from bumping into John's car?
Right.
Would there be some innocent, public servant who's out plowing in the storm that would have taken the fall for this, thinking, oh, did I not see him?
Yeah.
And, it's really scary because she's got the money to fight this and she's got the intellect to fight this.
Yeah.
That's
one thing that was really interesting. Just a final thought in the documentary was how involved she is in her own defense.
Well, she's a financial analyst. So she is used to looking collectively at things and analyzing and looking big picture and then microscopically. And I do think that helps. Now, I do think there are times her attorneys want her to just pipe it down, put a mask on that face, don't roll those eyes, Karen.
Right.
But, I do think they believe in her innocence.
Yeah, I do too. I don't think honestly, I don't think they would have stuck around for trial too if they didn't.
Yeah, pro bono.
Yeah.
Pro bono.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they've got to be tired by now.
Well, they look a little haggard. Alan Jackson, I think, is really struggling this time. I don't know if he doesn't feel good, but I've noticed the past several days he does not look rested, and the stress I think is getting to him. But I do think Robert Alessi is a great addition to the defense. And I do think they like him.
Yeah. So tell everyone where they can find you if they don't know.
Well, you can find me at Caught in My Web. That's my podcast on Patreon. I also have a book coming out. You can go to my website, jodeneweber.com. It's my debut suspense novel called The Bald-Faced Deception.
So exciting.
That will be coming out May 20th. So you can find that at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere books are sold. And then on social media at Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Jodene Weber, and Instagram is Weber Jodene.
Okay, and I'll put a link in the show notes for your website and your podcast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Jodene.
And thank you for having me, Amy. Great to talk with you.
Thank you for coming. Anytime, come back, give us
I'd be
updates.
happy
as they
to.
happen.
Happy
Okay,
to.
great. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Little Miss Recap. If you'd like to support the show, the best way you can do that is to join our Twin Flame universe, which is our Patreon, Supercast, and Apple subscription feeds. The links for those are in the show notes. You get ad-free episodes and a ton of bonus content. You can also subscribe to the feed so you don't miss an episode, share the show with a friend, and leave a 5-star review. To contact the show, please email me directly at amy@littlemissrecap.com or join our Facebook group Backdoor Friends. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.